Okay, recording now, and now I'm going to share my screen. So for M and Segovia, what we were just looking at, let me go back. We were looking at if you go into open processing, there's this option up here called collect, and that's where all these MFTs are that people can purchase, and they're basically what we're doing now is they're just generative art, algorithms made to create beautiful visual experiences. So okay, so I'm going to go over some of the exercises from last class. So I'm going to create a sketch. X, E, 0. Okay, so the one with the squares was nested loops. So for let I equals 0, as long as I is less than the width, I plus equals, oh, I don't remember how much I did. It was like, I don't know, 80. And then inside of here, I'm doing another loop, but I'm using a different name of the variable because I'm going to need two different variables for these nested loops. So I'm using J, and I'm using height instead of the width because I want J to go up and down and I to go across. And then what I'm doing is I'm making a rectangle at I, J, and then what did I make it, like 60, 60, something like that. Let's see what we get. Okay, so we get those squares. So what I did is I said no fill, and then what I did was I made a variable. Well, actually, I didn't even make a variable. I just did no fill, and I said I did no fill. And then what I did here was I said stroke is red, so RGB, and instead of just, I'm gonna put in a transparency here, but instead of just putting one number, like if I put 100, I would get that, which is actually really low. Let's put it like 150. Okay, you can see it better. But instead of putting that 150, I put it at a random number, and that random number is going to change every time through the draw loop. So what I did is I put random, and it's going to go from 150 to 255, which is the max. So every time through the draw loop, every time it calls this line right here, rectangle, the transparency of the stroke is going to be different, and it's going to be somewhere between 150 and 255. So now if I run it, I'm getting something funky right now because the frame rate is 60 frames a second. But if I bring that down to like 2 per second, I get this effect. Maybe I'll bring this down to like 130. So there's a bit of a difference. So it's changing a little bit on every, it's only, you guys can even see that, can you? You want to turn up the light? Yeah, okay, let's do that. We'll just sit in the dark. It's fine. Okay, you can see it a little bit better. So it's switching. It's only running 2 times per second, and it's switching. So that's how that one was done. So I slowed down the frame rates, and I made the transparency random each time through the cycle. And that's all I did. It's really only what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code, 4 lines of code. So that's how I did that one with nested loops and just a random, you know, I could have done a whole random color if I wanted to with the fill, but I didn't. Let's talk about the one I did with the green circles that followed the mouse. So I'm going to keep this nested loop. I'm just going to leave it. Let's change it to 40. And I'm going to make lips. Oh, I have no fill on here. Turn that off. I'm going to turn off frame rate. I have a lips, and then I'm going to put it at IJ, and then like 30, 30. And then I get a grid of circles. So the object was to get the size of the grid to follow the mouse. And so all I did for this, and this just is a matter of thinking about where are you putting the different numbers, you know, like where are you putting the I, where are you putting, like experiment, like put I in some weird random location and see what happens, and put J in some weird random location and see what happens. Or maybe like add I and J together and see what happens and things like that. So all I did here was I changed width to mouse X, and I changed height to mouse Y. And now it follows. So what's happening here is before, when I had width right here, the circles were going all the way across the screen because that's where I told it to stop. But now it's mouse X. So they're only going to go as far as the mouse X. So right here, the mouse X is probably at 100. So that loop is going to stop at 100 pixels, and it's not going to draw anymore. And the same thing with mouse Y. It's going to stop at, you know, let's say this is 300. It's only going to draw down to 300, and then it's going to stop. So just play with these numbers. Like that's the whole point of this project. You just experiment with these things. You're going to get really interesting results. And make sure you just keep saving the things you get so that you have lots to choose from, because you're going to choose your favorite 8. And hopefully there'll be a wide variety of different things you've experimented with: lines, circles, triangles, squares, all sorts of stuff. Okay, so there's that. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to go over. I want to go over typography really fast, because you might want to use typography in your sketches, you know, in what you're doing. And again, you don't necessarily have to do loops for this. You don't have to do nested loops. You could just do one loop, or you could just have random things all over the screen. But we haven't gone over typography, so I thought we could do that. So let me get all of this out. and change the background to 255. So the functions for typography, you can always look up in the reference. So if we go to the reference here and we go down to typography, we can see that we have text align, text wedding, size, style, width, ascent, descent, and text wrap. We have all of these available to us. And the one that just actually displays the text is just text. And all you do is you give it, this is it right here. You just give it what you want it to display in quotes, and then the X and the Y of where you want to display it. And you can do other things like tell it what size you want it to. You can change the font with all of those other functions we just saw. But let's do a really simple one where I'm just going to say, first I'm going to change the fill to, the fill is going to be, I want the fill to be black. And then I'm just going to say text, hello, and I'm going to say 100, 200, and then run that. And then we get the word hello right there. It's really small, so let's change the text size to 80. And now I get a better hello. So imagine if you combine typography with a loop, you could get some really interesting things there. Let's see. What if you wanted to use a custom font? Because right now we can only use the fonts that are installed on the host, the local machine. So what if I wanted to use a custom font? The way we do that is we have to actually sort of link to that font file, and it's pretty easy. In the reference, you can see it here under typography. We go to text font right here, or actually let's go to load fonts. That's what we're going to need, is we need to load the font first. So first thing we have to do is we have to grab the font file and add it to the project. And then Open Processing will combine it, once you export, it'll combine it into, it'll put the file in the folder for you and put the file path and everything. But what we're going to do is first we're going to add the font to the project. So first I have to save this in order to do this. Hello. Okay, there we go. We got that. Okay, so now I can go over here. This is really annoying. And under files, this is where I can add the font file that I want to use. I'm not totally sure on exactly what types of file. I know that OTF works. I think TTF files work as well. Let me just open up my fonts folder here. Let's see, it's capitalized. No. Oh, is it me or just like the search change all the time? No. There we go. That's the one we want. Okay, So I'm looking for an OTF file that I can use. There's a lot of TTF files. We could, we could experiment right now and see if the TTF file works. Let me just search for OTF. I know the OTF. I think TTF files work. Let's try a TTF file. Let's get out of this. I don't even know all of these. What do I want here? What does this one look like? Okay, let's just, no, I don't want that. What's this one look like? Not using Comic Sans. Hell no. What's Damascus look like? No. All right, well, no, dude, that was a TTC. Oh, I'm totally failed here. No, we don't want font book. You can always, if TTF doesn't work, you can always convert a TTF to an OTC. All you have to do is Google TTF to OTC converter, and you'll get all these websites that will allow you to upload one file and it'll convert it. You can find that with like almost any file. If you want to convert it from one file format to another, you can almost always find a generator, some sort of converter online. That's really easy. So I'm going to use DIN. I know I like DIN. DIN is good. Okay, so I'm going to drag DIN. I'm going to drag DIN over into this files area here. Okay, so now DIN is there. So the thing I need to do, we're going to introduce a new function here that we haven't used yet, and it's called preload, because using a font file might take a little bit of time for it to upload the file, and you don't want to run the program until the file is available. So we're going to put a different function in here called preload. Did I spell it right? Preload. And I can just go over to the reference here and function preload right there. And we're going to do this. I'm going to call this DIN, because that's the name of the photo. So, okay, so let me back up here. I'm going to make a variable called DIN. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm calling a function called load font, but it's going to go get the file. I hope this works. Alternate bold.ttf. Okay, that's the name of the file that I put in here. So it's just a file path basically. And now DIN is a variable that is holding on to that font file. So now I can go over here and say text font, and I'm going to say DIN, and let's see if it works. No, it didn't work. Okay, I might have to use an OT. Let's just use a font that is included on the system for now. And I have another a sketch that I'm going to use Georgia. Okay, and I have another sketch that you can access on my account where you can see how this works. Okay, I'm going to use Georgia I'm gonna run this. There we go. Now it's in Georgia. So that's how you can use text. And I could also put in here, instead of the word hello, I could put a number like 42. I don't even have to have quotes around it. It'll do the number 42. So let's do something really fun right now. I want to make, I'm gonna make this a lot larger. No, not 2000, that's crazy. Okay, I want to make it like there's several layers of the font and they're kind of like offset from each other. They're a little bit in different places. So instead of doing everything at 100, 200, I'm gonna make a couple variables up here. I'm gonna say let rand for random x and let for random y. And then what I'm gonna do is, before we call text every time, I'm gonna say rand x equals random. I'm gonna say -10 and 10. And so what I'm doing is basically, I want it to move either a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right or a little bit up or a little bit down, but I want it to stay around, what is the x here, 100? So I'm gonna say 100 plus random. So the first time around, it's gonna be either like, the x is gonna be like 108, or it's gonna be 97, depending on what the random number is, or it's gonna be, 102, or it's gonna be a 92, because it's the random is between negative and positive 10. So sometimes the random is gonna be like -8, sometimes. So it's just taking one location of 100 pixels and it's just shifting it a little bit each time through the loop. I'm also going to do a random on the Y, and I have that at 200 right now. So I'm going to say 200 plus, and this is going to come into play in one of your exercises. So might want to follow along. So random Y there. I'm also going to change the fill so we can actually see the difference. So I'm going to say fill 255, 255, 0. Okay. So that's what we're getting right now. So I'm going to do 3 more of these. And you could totally put this in a loop too, since I'm sort of copying. So I'm just going to do it this way for now. And then I'm just going to change the color on this one to 255. And then I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to change the color here to 0, 255. So what I'm doing is I'm calling text 3 times. So it's going to do 3 versions of the number 42. Or I could change that back to hello. And then every time through the draw loop, it's going to put each one in a different random kind of position, but not random all over the screen, but random kind of relative to where we want it to be. So if I run this, nothing. Oh, I forgot to do something. I forgot to change. Oh, I also want no stroke. Okay, I forgot to change the X into Y to random X and random Y. Let me change that. Okay. So now we're getting this effect. So they're in a random position, but they're not going too far away from 100, 200, which is where I said I wanted it to be. So they're staying around there. So I could add here frame rate of 0. So it's not going to loop. And then every time through the loop, it's going to be a different composition. So it's kind of a neat way to add some randomness to your design. So imagine you put this in a loop. Each version of 42 would be a little bit different than the last one. Okay. And if you want to see that in action, if you go to my sketches here, you go to my profile and you go to my sketches, I have one here that says fonts, and it's doing exactly that, except I'm actually using, if you can see here in the files, I'm actually using this font right here, Compact Display. I wonder if it's because there were spaces in the name of the other font. I wonder if that's why, or maybe it's just because it's a TTF. But anyway, you know, that's how you can kind of move things around like that. What else did I want to go over? Oh, I also wanted to point out that you can use a loop. You can create a loop and never actually use I or J or whatever variable you're using that's incrementing. You can just use a loop to just do something a number of times instead of, you know, incrementing something, or like, for example, I can, if I want something to just happen 4 times, let's say, I can make a loop that says for let equals 0, and then I'm going to say, oh, let I equals 0. Sorry, I always do that. I equals 0. And then I'm going to say I is less than 4. Or I could say I is less than or equal to 4 if I wanted it to actually go 3 times. And then I'm going to say I plus plus. So it's going to increment by 1 each time. So what this does is it creates a loop that is definitely only going to run 4 times. So then I could do something like rect and instead of using I for the X and Y, I could just use a random number where I want it to appear. So I just want it to be in a random place on the canvas, just a random place. So X is just going to be random width, so somewhere between 0 and the width. Y is going to be random height, so somewhere between 0 and the bottom. And then I'll just make them 30 by 30. And it's happening over and over again because I don't have frame rate shut off. So I'm getting, oh, it's actually going to 5 because it starts at 0. Okay, so actually if I wanted 4, I wouldn't put the equal sign. So if I only want 4, I would just do that. So I'm getting, they're just in, so I'm not actually using I, I'm just looping. That's all I'm doing. I'm just looping 4 times to create something. Any questions about any of these so far? I haven't asked you. I've just been going straight through this. So far, so good. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the exercises. Over here under exercises 2-9. And what I want you to do first, and you know, this is really similar to what I just did, draw 100 circles just in random locations on the canvas. So make a loop that happens 100 times and just draw a circle in a random location. And you probably want to turn the frame rate to 0 to do this. And then pretty simply just alter your code so it looks something like this. So it's still choosing random locations, but it's all coming back to the center. Then I want you to play with, just play with using typography. So make something like this where there's random numbers. There's random numbers all over the screen. So again, you're going to want to use the random function where in place of a word, you know, I put the word hello in quotes, and that's what got written. So you're going to want to put something there that represents a random number. And I put a little hint here. You might get results that you don't expect. So look up this function here, int stands for integer. Look that up in the reference, and that will help you refine it so that it actually looks like this. And then in the last one, these don't require nested loops, but the last one requires nested loops where you're going to create a grid of circles, which you've done before, you know how to do, but you're going to make it so that each one of these circles is in a slightly different position. They're not exactly where I and J are telling them to be. They're just moved a little bit, kind of like the type that I just did. And look at the difference in the effect of this. This is kind of crazy, kind of chaotic. This is a little bit more organic. It has a completely different experience to it. Like I said, more natural in a way. So you can create interesting compositions using this. I think a good example of this method is I showed you some of the former students' work. There's one that Kelsey did was really cool. This one right here, up here, where she has just random shapes, but they're all constrained to a certain area. So she's doing several different rectangles, all constrained to a certain area. Let's see, I think it's number 2. Yeah, and she's got it locked on there. So that's an example of using randomness, but constraining it to a certain area inside of a nested loop. Okay. So any questions? You ready for this? I think you can do this. Okay, and then just add them. I created, I think it's collection number 5 or 6 or whatever the next collection is in open processing, and then just add them to that one. Okie dokie. All right, and then I'm here. I'm just gonna walk around, and when you, yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Of course. That's just the random one. Was there a different one you wanted to look at? Okay, yeah. So I'll keep that open. For now, I might want to go back and check the collection. So. Okay. Okay, and Michaela and Em, you guys can get started and add them to the collection as you finish them so we can take a look. Sound good? Do you guys have any questions? Nope, you good? Okay. Very good. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and stop record because after this, it's kind of boring, isn't it?